Welcome back to the channel. If you're here, you're about to get a complete, in-depth review and full understanding of one of the most important automobiles ever created. In this video, we're leaving no stone unturned. We'll explore the exterior design and styling cues that turned heads for decades, take you through the luxurious interior that redefined comfort, examine the technology that was genuinely ahead of its time, experience the raw performance and driving dynamics, understand the practicality and ownership experience, and we'll dive deep into both the strengths and weaknesses of this machine. We'll talk about the pricing and value proposition when it launched, compare it with the competitors that tried to replicate its formula, and by the time you reach the end of this video, you'll have the complete picture. You'll know exactly what makes this car special, what it struggled with, and why it remains so relevant in automotive history today. So stick with us until the end, because the details you're about to discover will completely shape how you understand this vehicle. Now, let me take you back to 1963. The American automotive industry was in a peculiar moment. Muscle cars were just beginning to rumble onto the horizon, full-size sedans dominated family driveways, and sports cars were still considered somewhat exotic curiosities for the wealthy. But there was a gap in the market, a space that nobody had really figured out how to fill. There was this untapped audience of successful, sophisticated people who wanted something different. They didn't want a family sedan. They didn't want a sports car either, at least not in the traditional sense. They wanted luxury, they wanted style, they wanted to make a statement. They wanted a car that said something about who they were. That's the world into which Buick introduced the Riviera in 1963, but it was the second generation, arriving in 1965, that truly perfected the formula and created something that would become the blueprint for an entirely new category. This wasn't just a car, it was the birth of the personal luxury coupe as we know it today. Let's talk about what makes the 1965 Riviera so visually stunning. When you first lay eyes on this car, there's an immediate presence, an undeniable elegance that photographs simply cannot capture. The proportions are almost perfect. The wheelbase is long, stretching out elegantly, while the cabin sits perched toward the rear, creating this sense of forward momentum even when the car is standing still. But it's the details that separate this from everything else on the road. Look at that distinctive split front bumper design, the way it wraps around the body like a protective embrace. The hood is absolutely massive, suggesting the powerful engine that sits beneath, and the front end features a vertical grille with chrome that catches the light beautifully. But the real magic happens along the sides. Buick gave the Riviera these exceptional sculptural lines, this sense of motion and grace that flows from the front wheel all the way to the rear. The greenhouse, that's the glass area, is positioned in a way that feels intimate and cocooning, yet the glass area is substantial enough that you feel connected to the world around you. And those lines, the way they sweep upward and backward, they create this almost aeronautical quality, as though the car wants to fly. At the rear, you've got these distinctive round taillights, twin chrome bumpers that echo the front design philosophy, and a trunk lid that flows seamlessly from the bodyline. The whole package is wrapped in a premium color palette that Buick was famous for. Whether it's the stunning greens, the deep blues, the reds, or that gorgeous cream white that seems to glow in the sunlight. This isn't just beautiful automotive design, it's a work of art that happens to have wheels and an engine. But beautiful design means nothing if the inside doesn't match, and Buick understood this perfectly. Step into the Riviera, and you're immediately surrounded by quality. The seats are wide, inviting, wrapped in supple leather or rich cloth depending on the trim level. They're not just comfortable, they're genuinely luxurious. There's plenty of legroom for tall drivers and passengers, and the bench seat design means you can fit 3 people up front comfortably if needed, though most owners probably appreciated the ability to slide that middle seat over and have their passenger right beside them. The dashboard is where the Riviera really showcases its sophistication. It's horizontal, uncluttered, and absolutely brimming with the kinds of details that matter. You've got a proper instrument cluster with easy-to-read gauges, a modern steering wheel that's proportioned correctly for American driving, and controls that are intuitive and satisfying to use. The dashboard itself features beautiful wood grain trim and chrome accents that catch the light. There's a radio, an AM/FM radio, that was considered quite modern for the era, and the heating and air conditioning systems are robust and powerful. Air conditioning in the mid-1960s was still a luxury feature, but Buick made sure it was effective and integrated seamlessly into the climate control story. The trunk is absolutely cavernous, offering plenty of space for luggage, golf bags, or whatever you needed to carry. The back seat, while not the most spacious for actual occupants, is fine for occasional passengers or additional cargo space. Overall, the interior feels timeless. You look at these materials, these proportions, this layout, and it still feels modern today, which is the highest compliment you can give to automotive design. Now, the technology side of a 1965 car is obviously going to feel quaint compared to what we have today, but for its era, the Riviera was genuinely sophisticated. You had a proper power steering system that made maneuvering this large car effortless, especially at low speeds or when parking. Power windows were standard or available depending on the trim, which sounds like nothing today, but in 1965 this was a notable luxury feature. The air conditioning system we mentioned was quite advanced, offering temperature control rather than just venting cold air. Buick included excellent heating as well, important for customers in colder climates. The lighting system was good for the era, with proper low and high beams and adequate visibility. Safety-wise, Buick included a solid steel frame, padded dashboard, and seat belts, though crash protection was nowhere near what modern standards demand. The ignition system was reliable, using conventional spark plugs and points, which meant regular maintenance, but also predictability. There was no computer, no electronic fuel injection, no power steering assist beyond mechanical systems, no power brakes beyond a strong vacuum-assisted system. But what matters is that Buick executed what they had brilliantly. Everything worked when you needed it to work, and the engineering was sound and thoughtfully applied. Let's talk about the engine and what drives the Riviera. The standard power plant was a 3.5-litre V8 engine, a compact and efficient design that produced a respectable 210 horsepower. But here's where it gets interesting. For buyers who wanted more, Buick offered the legendary 401 cubic inch engine. This was a 6.6-litre V8 that produced 325 horsepower, and when you consider that this engine weighed nearly the same as the smaller V8, but delivered substantially more power, you begin to understand the engineering compromises and ingenuity of the era. Both engines were paired with either a 2-speed automatic transmission or a 3-speed automatic, depending on the year and specification. The smaller engine delivered perfectly adequate performance for daily driving, with acceleration that was quick but not aggressive, and fuel economy that was acceptable for a car of this size. The 401 engine, however, transformed the Riviera. This became a genuine performance machine. 0 to 60 happened in around 8 seconds, which was genuinely quick for the period, and the passing power on the highway was absolutely addictive. That deep V8 rumble, the vibration through the steering wheel, the sense that you've got real mechanical power at your command, it's intoxicating. The fuel consumption climbed significantly with the larger engine, but owners of the day seemed perfectly willing to pay that price for the performance and presence. When you drive a 1965 Riviera, you're struck immediately by how composed it feels. This is a heavy car, around 4,000 pounds, and despite the lack of modern suspension technology, the engineers did something really clever. They created a suspension setup that isolates you from the road without feeling numb. The steering is direct and responsive, without that loose, vague feeling that characterized some American cars of the era. The brakes, while not particularly powerful by modern standards, are more than adequate for the speeds people actually drove in the mid-1960s, and they have good modulation. The biggest revelation, however, is how this car handles on a winding road. You'd expect a 17-foot-long luxury coupe to be a wallowing, uncomfortable thing on curves, but it's not. There's a composure, a fundamental rightness about how the Riviera plants itself. It encourages you to drive with confidence, and the big wheel means that highway cruising becomes an almost meditative experience. At 65 miles per hour, the engine is turning over so slowly that you can barely hear it. The isolation from wind and road noise is remarkable, and the feeling of floating down the highway in a cloud of leather and chrome is absolutely special. Cornering is competent rather than thrilling, but the car will reward smooth, deliberate driving with a kind of precision that's surprising for something so large. Hard acceleration reveals the weight and the mechanical nature of the drivetrain, but it's never uncontrollable or scary. The 1965 Riviera is fundamentally a car that wants to please its driver, and it succeeds at this in almost every scenario. As a practical machine, the Riviera makes interesting compromises. The two-door configuration means that getting in and out of the rear seat requires some contortions for taller passengers. But this is par for the course for the era. The trunk space is genuinely useful, offering more capacity than most sports cars of the period. The interior width is generous, so even if you're carrying 5 people, nobody feels particularly cramped. Fuel economy, as we mentioned, ranges from respectable to poor depending on which engine you choose, but fuel was inexpensive in the 1960s, so this was less of a concern. Maintenance is straightforward. These are mechanically simple cars with parts that are easy to access and service. The cooling system is robust, though you need to stay on top of your radiator maintenance and flush schedules. Parts availability today is actually excellent because the Riviera is popular with collectors and classic car enthusiasts, so finding replacement parts isn't nearly as difficult as it might be for more obscure vehicles. Reliability is good if the car has been maintained, though some original systems are beginning to show their age in cars that are now almost 60 years old. The strengths of the 1965 Riviera are numerous and compelling. It's genuinely beautiful, a car that still turns heads and inspires admiration today. The size and proportions feel right in a way that's hard to articulate. The interior is genuinely comfortable and luxurious, with a sense of quality and materials that modern cars sometimes miss. It's fast enough to be exciting, but not so fast that it's intimidating. The reliability is good and parts are available. It's affordable to purchase on today's collector car market compared to some alternatives. The prestige factor is real. This car says something about the owner. But there are weaknesses too. The brakes are not powerful by modern standards and require longer stopping distances. There's no power steering assistance beyond mechanical systems, so parking a 17-foot car in tight urban spaces requires real effort. The air conditioning, while present, isn't as effective as modern systems. Fuel consumption can be substantial, particularly with the larger engines. The interior soundproofing is adequate but not exceptional, so you hear more road noise and engine noise than modern cars offer. The safety features are minimal by modern standards. There are no airbags, no crumple zones, no stability control, and the seatbelts are basic. For restoration and repair, finding original upholstery patterns or exact replacement parts can be challenging. And finally, while the car is generally reliable, anything that goes wrong will require specialists who understand 1960s technology and manufacturing standards. When the Riviera launched in 1965, it was priced at approximately $4,500, which translated to around $35,000 to $40,000 in today's money, depending on which inflation calculator you use. This positioned it as a premium vehicle well above the average American car, but below the truly luxury marques like Cadillac and Lincoln. This pricing was brilliant strategy because it appealed to people who wanted luxury and status but weren't quite ready to make the jump to a traditional luxury car. The value proposition was compelling. You got a beautiful, well-appointed, powerful car that made a statement, and you paid somewhat less than you would have for a Cadillac. Today, a 1965 Riviera in good condition typically sells for between $25,000 and $45,000, with pristine examples commanding premium prices. This represents excellent value for a car that's this beautiful, this historically significant, and this genuinely usable. Compared to a 1960s muscle car or sports car of equivalent era, the Riviera is often more comfortable, more practical, and equally quick, while offering superior interior quality. Compared to a traditional American luxury car, it's more stylish, more nimble, and less expensive to maintain. The competition in 1965 was actually quite limited, which is part of what made the Riviera so successful. The Oldsmobile Cutlass was more of a mid-size muscle car contender. The Pontiac Grand Prix, which launched a year later, was Pontiac's answer to the Riviera, and it was actually quite good, though many felt it didn't quite match the Riviera's sophistication or styling. The Mercury Marauder was another competitor, bigger and bulkier than the Riviera, aimed at buyers who wanted full-size luxury rather than personal luxury. The Ford Thunderbird was perhaps the closest competitor, a full-size personal luxury car that shared some of the Riviera's design philosophy, but the Thunderbird was larger and more expensive. Chevrolet didn't really have a direct competitor until later in the decade. What made the Riviera special was that it hit a sweet spot that nobody else had quite captured. It offered genuine luxury in a package that was more manageable, more nimble, and arguably more beautiful than its competitors. Looking at the 1965 Riviera today, the impact it had on the automotive industry becomes crystal clear. This car essentially created the personal luxury coupe category, a category that would dominate American car sales for the next couple of decades. The design influenced countless future Buicks and eventually vehicles across other brands. The formula of beautiful styling, genuine luxury, strong performance, and accessible pricing was copied by manufacturers worldwide. Even today, when we see an Infiniti Q60, a Cadillac Eldorado, or a modern BMW, we're looking at the spiritual descendants of this car. The 1965 Riviera proved that you didn't need to be the biggest or the most expensive to be special. You needed elegance, thoughtful engineering, and a clear understanding of what your customer wanted. That's a lesson that remains relevant today. So, what's the final word on the 1965 Buick Riviera? It's a car that absolutely deserves its place in automotive history. It's beautiful in a way that transcends decades. It's comfortable and practical enough for real-world use. It's fast enough to be genuinely fun. The build quality is genuinely impressive, and the design is timeless. Yes, it has weaknesses. Yes, modern cars are safer, faster, and more efficient. But what the 1965 Riviera offers that very few modern cars can replicate is character. It's a car with a soul, a personality, a sense of occasion. Every time you get behind the wheel, you're reminded that you're driving something special. And maybe that's the ultimate compliment we can give any automobile. If you found this deep dive into the 1965 Riviera fascinating, please hit that like button. It really does help us reach more automotive enthusiasts like yourself. Subscribe to the channel because we've got more legendary vehicles coming your way, and I promise you'll want to see what's next. Drop a comment below and tell us, would you drive a 1965 Riviera today? Would you restore one? Have you ever owned or driven a classic Buick? Your stories and thoughts genuinely matter to us. Thanks for spending this time learning about this absolutely iconic piece of automotive history. I'll see you in the next video.